If you're a Pittsburgh baseball fan, then this is the podcast for you. Make your way down, grab a beverage, and get ready to talk Pirates with myself, Craig Toth, and Scott Jackson, two of the biggest fans you'll ever meet. This is Bucs in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
I became, I don't know if it would be Twitter or X famous this past week. And I don't even know if Scott even saw this. And people may not even know that it was me. There is an account out there, and I love the name of this account. It's Bob Nutting Disliker. So it's like if somebody's like mom said, you can't use the word hate. You can't be the Bob Nutting hater. You're the Bob Nutting Disliker. Took a picture of me, unknowing to myself until I got home from PiratesFest later that night, of me in my Lastings Millage Pirates jersey, saying this is what PiratesFest is all about. And underneath, there was arguments as to why I was wearing that jersey, because he is a Mets legend. But to me, I mean, that is what PiratesFest is about. I break that jersey out at least 2 to 3 times a year because it's so obscure. But yes, that was me. I am ex-Twitter famous from PiratesFest. Scott, how you doing, brother?
I feel blessed to be in the presence of someone who is so famous. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule of promoting Lastings Millage to speak with me this week. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, not a problem, man. And yes, I was at PiratesFest. I know exactly what I was doing at that point in time. My kiddos had gotten on to, well, 2 of my kiddos, because the one is too old to participate in the kiddo activities at this point in time. We're out on the little baseball field they had made up there, running the bases. Both of my sons got to take a little bit of fielding practice, play a little bit of catch with Jared Jones, which they were completely jazzed about. Unfortunately, for my oldest boy, Andy Rodriguez had come off the field and wasn't giving the hitting instruction anymore. Billy Cook was out there. A bunch of cool different things. And for me, that's kind of what PiratesFest is about. It's about the kids for me. Obviously, there were, some storylines that come out of there. Most of it from the Q&A. I mean, aside from the expired pop, which would be blamed on the Pirates, even though it was under the David L. Lawrence Convention Center's, I guess, umbrella. They did misspell Andrew McCutcheon's name, which is a faux pas within Pirates fandom. But as Cutch always does, he has some fun with it, and the next day has the T kind of crossed out on his jersey. But for the most part, the answers and the questions that came about during that Q&A wasn't really anything new, nothing that was too unexpected.
Nothing groundbreaking, nothing that really made a whole bunch of headlines other than Greg Brown, asking people to be respectful, which, like you said, it's for the kids. It's a celebration of the team. We know what time it is. We know exactly what's going on. We know what the economics of baseball are and how we're moving more towards 2, 3, 4 teams having super teams and the rest just trying to keep up. And I'm sure we'll talk about that as the Dodgers continue their spending spree. But it's a celebration. It's an opportunity for kids to meet the players. I mean, you and I, we're big kids that love, baseball so much. But really, yeah, I wish that the weather was a little better. I wish that it was maybe I was a little closer. I could take my kids. so they could walk around and be indifferent about it and complain, is it time to leave because they don't love baseball the way I do. But yeah, I mean, I think that it needs Bob does need to, you know, uh, take some of the heat at some point, maybe just as a pressure valve. Just stand up there and take a few questions and give some answers and present his side of it, because really, as we're seeing, the economics of baseball are broken, and he doesn't need to cry poverty. We know he's a billionaire. We know that he's, super wealthy, but within the clubs, the club of owners, and the economics of it, he is disadvantaged. But running and hiding, and we know he was there. I saw him taking pictures. Right, he took pictures with people. We saw that on social media. Just stand up there, and I guess the problem would be if he was up on that stage. Almost all the questions you would feel would, if they're not pre-selected, would be just directed at him, and kind of take some of the focus off some of the more procedural questions, and business questions that the front office would face.
Yeah, and that's the piece of it right there is that, I mean, there was some rumors. I didn't really see it, but there was an extra chair on there and it was taken out at the last minute. It could have been a chair that, Greg Brown could have been sitting in, but he said, no, I'm just going to walk around the entire time. Whatever it may be, we do know that if, Bob Nutting was up there, the chance of sell the team, a little bit of the rousing stuff may have gotten, I wouldn't say out of hand, but it may have been greater than it was than just a couple people screaming it. Obviously, I did see a decent amount of people walking around with the shirts that had been handed out and everything. But I mean, pretty much, the questions that were asked, there were some things about spending money. There was some things about trading players. There was stuff about extending players. Ben Charrington went on his normal, we want to win, which, he pretty much said the same thing last year, just using different words. Last year it was compete and contend, talking about the Diamondbacks last year and their 84 wins and trying to move towards that. Discussions of course, we would like to keep, this person around, whoever it may be. I know that Cruz and Skeens were the obvious names that were brought up for the extensions, and that type of stuff is kind of going on there. But I did tell you the one thing, and I'll just kind of put this out here for people to just really take a look at, just because it was something that I don't know if I had been parroting kind of what I heard, or maybe didn't look into the numbers as deeply and as I normally do, because I mean, I've told people if I'm sitting on the couch, usually here we're recording a day late. It's 9:50 at night. I would usually be, scrolling through Pirate statistics, whether it be major, minor leagues. And I really didn't, I guess, look into this one as much as I could have. And the question was concerning IKF and his ability to play shortstop. The comments that were made is that, the metrics and the way that the Pirates are doing that evaluation, they see him as, really having the ability to kind of play that position. And, obviously people come out and say, well, that's not what the metrics show. So I thought I would just, let me go back and kind of double check my work here. It's like kind of like that, what is it? Measure twice, cut once type of mentality. And looking at it, yeah, the outs above average on Fangraphs show him since 2001 as a negative 10 outs above average at the shortstop position. So obviously, if you like Fangraphs and you just want to stop there, it's like, okay, well, IKF is not a very good shortstop. I went over to Baseball Reference. I'm going to, kind of check that with the defensive runs saved. In 2021 and 2022, when he was a full-time shortstop, the first year there he was in Texas. The next year he was in New York. I mean, there were some stuff with errors. I know that he had, 19 errors in Texas, 15 errors with the Yankees, but overall, the defensive run saved was showing up as 10 not for both years, but 10 in each year. So 20 in those years combined, which is a fairly solid number. When he was with the Rangers, they do a thing that's kind of called like their range, the way they are able to move, and that's usually side to side. That showed him as the best shortstop with range for the Rangers in 2021. He had the most assists, the most double plays that year, and played the position pretty well. Going back to the Fangraphs, it showed that the place where he was dinged the most was coming in on the ball, which is something weird because I always thought he couldn't play the position because of the side to side, but it really seems to be, the balls that he would really need to charge. And I don't know what like coming in on the ball, if you're coming in like and still moving a little bit left to right, or if you're going across to second base, like it also depends on where you're positioned of where that could be. But it made me at least pause at the fact that the 2 seasons prior to this one, where he had the most success, and when he had, if you just want to take and look at the WAR, he had at or around a 3 WAR, a 3.6 WAR with the Rangers as a full-time shortstop. And this year, where he got most of that numbers from was an offensive production we've never seen before. 2023 with the Yankees, they moved him around to a bunch of different positions, outfield, everything, stuff that we've talked about, stuff that, other podcasters, media, and fans have talked about, is where he actually had his worst season.
Let's not forget he's a Gold Glover, so the talent is in there. And you're right, the positioning, coming in on balls, which for me, just the eye test, seeing that he doesn't have the strongest arm for shortstop, I really, if you asked me, would have thought that going back on balls would have been more of a problem because of the range that his arm has. But like we were talking before we got on, a lot of times Key Brian Hayes will cut over in front of the shortstop and take away his need to charge a lot of those balls. So really what it's going to come down to is this team is constructed in a certain way, and we talk about them having a plan, Ben having a plan for how he's putting together his roster, how he's going to deploy the guys that are on the roster. And this team is going to be, if it's going to be successful, it's going to be built on pitching and defense, limiting the runs of the other team, because we know that they're not likely going to be an explosive offense. So wins are going to come from that solid rotation that we're hopefully going to see, and then a bounce back bullpen. And the defense is going to have to play. So it came out this week too that in the calculus of deciding to move O'Neal Cruz to center field, that the trade for IKF kind of played a part in that. So it was a chess move. All of these things are intertwined. And so it's good that you were digging into those things so we can see what the team is seeing. Because if you're only looking at one set of analytics, you're scratching your head and you're saying, why would they do this? Where now we're getting a better picture of, oh, these might be the things that the team is looking at to see this is the plan moving forward to maximize the defense. Because a lot of strong defenders on this team. Horwitz profiles for an above average first baseman. You've got Jared Triolo, who just won a Gold Glove. You've got Key Brian Hayes, who's a Gold Glover. IKF is a Gold Glover. The outfield, you got to think that O'Neal Cruz, with his speed and his arm, he's going to probably be a top half of the league center fielder if he can grow into that position. The corners, of course, are going to be a wild card, like we've been talking about all offseason. So I'm glad that you looked into those things to kind of give us a more clear picture of maybe what the team is expecting. Because one of the things we've talked about in the offseason is, are they going to move IKF around? Are they going to have Triolo at short? And then who's going to be the super utility guy that's going to bounce all around and get his at-bats? Well, it's sounding like IKF is going to be the day-to-day shortstop.
Yeah, and it's basically like you said, trying to figure out like what is their motivation and what are they trying to do? Obviously, if it doesn't work out, then they don't look very smart. They look extremely dumb. If it does work out, then, they kind of look like geniuses. And that's where it kind of comes with a team that is, building a roster, on the cheap. And
Yeah.
they're looking for these little types of advantages. Obviously, right now the 40 man is full. McCutcheon is, kind of officially signed. The two players that caused such a commotion at the beginning of the season in Tristan Gray and Trey Cabbage, no longer, on the 40 man. Kind of like we said before, like you pick these guys up, and will they even be there, till spring training? And the answer was for both of them, at least on the 40 man. I mean, Cabbage is off playing overseas now, but I mean, it definitely doesn't look that way. But yeah, I mean, there are obviously some places where they could still, move guys off. That's where these types of we're seeing a lot of DFAs recently as the rosters of the teams get fuller. Um, Teams making some tough decisions. Teams, you know, maybe pushing a guy off that you would expect them to. I mean, I know that there's a lot of options that Pirates fans would think of. I mean, obviously, like an Alika Williams, Sung Chae Chang is still down, in Double A, maybe moving up to Triple A this year. But is that a guy that you haven't really got to see much from? So are you going to do that type of stuff? I know that Joshua Palacios is listed as, the starting right fielder
Right.
on the depth charts on roster resources right now. But I mean, is obviously a guy who's not unfamiliar with that sort of territory. So if they would make a move in that direction, he could be a casualty. But I mean, at the point in time that we're at right now, Pirates roster at 40, but I mean, there's got to be a move to be made somewhere just because, I mean, we keep talking about those holes in right field. Right now, it kind of looks like something we've talked about before of, is it going to be Sawinski and Billy Cook? Whatever it may be, Palacios and Billy Cook. I really think that something will be added, but of the remaining free agents, after everybody goes on their, jerks and Profar, I guess it would be tantrum. Those will probably have died down by the time you listen to this on Saturday morning. But I mean, it's still left with the guys that when we finally broke down and had, our free agent show, it's the guys that we talked about. Those are the guys that are left. If you look at the free agent outfielders, it's Verdugo, it's Grichuk, it's Laureano, it's Hayes. I mean, that's pretty much like where you're at. And not that I don't want Pirates fans to be upset because you want to have that hope and maybe that expectation that it would be more. I just never really saw it. And it was just because of the Sawinski type things that we've talked about. Joshua Palacios, the versatility of Billy Cook. I thought they were going to rely more on that. And that's kind of what's coming true.
Yeah, and the moves that they've already made, they really weren't. I don't think anybody was really a must-have for me. There wasn't somebody who really stood out as, oh, we have to go get this guy no matter what the cost. It just wasn't that kind of class, I didn't think. So I think that using the options that they have, I'm sure that they'll land on one of those guys, and it'll probably be the same old deal that we always see. A prove it kind of contract, a guy who's going to go in there and hopefully do the Jerkson Profar thing where he's going to make it, have a splash year and be able to cash in on that. And then in first base, Pete Alonso is still hanging out there, but no matter, even if he hangs there most of the rest of the offseason and the price tag comes way down, you're not going to sign a Pete Alonso to platoon with Spencer Horwitz. You already traded Luis Ortiz to get Horwitz. So that kind of limits the math of that. It's just a lackluster off season, and even as we sit here in the tail end of January, just looking at the options, the needs, and the options, yeah, I just don't see any big moves to be made unless they, lose their mind and maybe get a little desperate and decide to make a huge trade. But pitching depth is really where they have what they have to spend, right? And how deep do you want to deplete yourself there? Um, in this kind of situation, they they really just need to step up and spend a little bit of money, which they will. They'll go get a free agent, outfielder that'll plug in a couple of holes, and but it's not what everybody is banging the table trying to force them to spend more or sell the team. This is Major League Baseball right now. Uh, That's the off season that we're having, and to this point, the players have so much leverage right now in negotiations. It just every time I look at these contracts that get signed, every one of them looks like a massive overpay to me. And maybe that's a Stockholm syndrome as a Pirates fan that I have. What a major league free agent should cost, and it's probably 10 years behind all the other team fan bases what they're thinking. But man, I'm seeing what some of these contracts are, and like you're paying that much for that guy. Yeah, maybe I'm just worn down by this franchise over 30 plus years.
Yeah, and I mean, people saying like, obviously the Pirates could have paid 3 for 42 for a Jurickson Profar, banking on that he will be the same player he was in 2024, but not realizing the effect if he isn't,
Right.
that same player that he was in 2024, coming out of nowhere, really, at over 30 years old. I mean, that's not something that happens all the time with these types of players. And he could just as easily go back into obscurity, but a team like the Braves is able to take on a little bit of that risk. But I mean, we've even seen with the Braves when they won their World Series, and I don't even know why this is like kind of popping into my head. It was more of the moves they made at the trade deadline than all
Yeah.
of these smart contracts that they are signing with players, and the contracts that they were heralded for kind of keeping some of these guys around. The Braves have kind of gotten passed by in some ways uh, by some teams, to the point where it's like, are they going to be, they're fighting, for a playoff spot. So, I mean, that's where, this type of stuff comes in. And like you mentioned, the disparity. I mean, if you'd have told me the amount that Tanner Scott would have gotten, and I know that it's out there that the Red Sox had offered him more, which is something that goes against like what is the norm in baseball. Is like people are saying, well, they're going to go where they get paid more money. That's like what every free agent does, and he didn't do that. But still, like I'm just going to call it stupid money. I mean, that he
Yeah.
got. I mean, definitely one of the best relievers in the game at this moment, but I mean, who's to say he doesn't like pull a Hader or a Kimbrel at some point in time? Not saying it's gonna happen this year, but I mean, just to be able to put like that amount of money into a guy who becomes your third closer at this point in time, it's just absolutely kind of crazy as to the way that type of stuff happens.
Then you have the Buster Olney tweet talking about the culture that the Dodgers are building and how everybody's having fun and people want to go there. Well, no crap, they want to go there. They're paying boatloads of money. They're winning because they have huge payrolls. They won the World Series last year. Yeah, you go to the teams that you know are going to have the resources to put an all-star team out there every single year. Yeah, of course they're going to have fun. But you know what? You're going to have a year like the Mets had a couple years ago, that maybe like the Braves have it, that you have those high expectations, and those things, that fun is going to turn at some point because you're going to face a couple of key injuries. You're going to go through a little bit of a losing streak. You're going to underperform for a season, but the way it's looking right now, the Dodgers are becoming the new evil empire. They're just gobbling up everybody. And for the first time in a while, we are hearing the national media discuss the economics of baseball and the potential need for a salary cap. And I think
It's
it's overdue. Yeah, it really is. I mean, the NFL is the top sport right now in the United States. I think that that's not really disputable, and they have a salary cap system, which of course comes with a salary floor. That's an important part that people keep talking about. That they talk about, well, nobody cares. You don't need a cap, but you need a floor. I think they go hand in hand.
yeah, and to tell you the truth, it's in baseball they actually do have a fairly loose floor. It's not a floor that we all know about. It's not a floor that we discuss very much, but I mean that's something that should be in the news with, kind of what we, talked about with the A's needing to meet a certain threshold of revenue sharing to then, prove to the MLBPA that they're spending to that point of money. I know that the Marlins are another team that's mentioned in that. I mean, the Pirates have had what, like two, possibly three grievances, filed against them previously for this. So, I mean, they're definitely, the crazy thing is there actually is a floor. I mean, they do have the luxury tax system, which could be seen as what would be a loose cap, which is, if for anybody that watches the NBA, I mean, that's kind of what the NBA has like with that. So, I mean, they do have things in place to kind of make teams spend, or if they're not spending, to get up to speed, kind of like what the A's have done. And the Pirates, for as much as we, kind of poo poo as to how much they spend, and I do believe they still could spend more, they've bumped their payroll up every year, and that's kind of the expectation of that, quote unquote floor of the revenue sharing.
Yeah, and they're not the bottom of the league, so I don't know. They got called out by Ken Rosenthal. They're on foul territory. But it's like they're what, fourth or fifth in payroll, something like third, fourth, fifth. But he decided to use them as an example. But yeah, I think that, and but same thing we've talked about a lot is that if they continue to re-sign the players, that which is a nice step, you develop players that you have faith in and you want to keep them, but when you sign them to more money, you're not necessarily making the team better, but you are spending more money. And I think that that's been the plan all along. I mean, we'll have to see it, but during the playoff run, the 13, 14, 15, when the team was there, they spent more money. They broke 100 million at that time. Now we're talking 10 years ago. So hopefully we can get back to where we were 10 years ago. But if we look at the economics of baseball, so take our pirate fan hats off on this and think of yourself as a Twins fan or a Brewers fan or even somebody like the Diamondback. These kind of middle teams and just pick your favorite, maybe second tier payroll team and just compare their payroll versus the Dodgers, versus the Mets. The Phillies are right up there too. So it's not we're at the bottom, and we look all the way up, and we think, oh man, it's amazing that they're all the way up there. But there's such a large discrepancy between the tippy top and then that next level down of your Cardinal fans. The Cardinals have never, I think, been shy about spending some money and going out and getting, your Arenados, your Goldschmidts, and guys like that, and keeping some players. But to see that the Dodgers can just blow past all of them, and we talk about the luxury tax, and you bring that up, and that's a great point and all, but there are mechanisms within the luxury tax that if a team just says screw it, we're just going to spend, we're going to win, and we'll probably offset because we're going to make so much money by winning these World Series. We saw the Mets try to do that. It didn't work out for them, but it is working out for the Dodgers. So if they just decide we'll deal with the consequences, we'll pay the fine, we'll lose the draft picks. We want to win World Series. They have the ability to do that, and there's not the same kind of punishment. There's not the same kind of hard cap that some sports have.
No, and there definitely isn't. And the amount of money, because everybody thinks about that luxury tax and like how much these teams have to pay into it and how it gets dispersed. And I mean, it's been discussed on other programs before, but the piece of this is that it doesn't just get dispersed to like the poor of the poor. I mean, the Pirates aren't sitting there going, okay, go over because then all of this money will be coming to us. No, it goes to every single team that didn't spend to the luxury tax. So even the team that was, right up against it, and you see some of those teams kind of like pushing back and fighting to say, no, we definitely weren't under it. We know that we definitely weren't over it. We definitely know that we were under it because they want to get some of that money, just even that little bit of revenue. So it's just a very strange thing. And like you said, the national media, I mean, even them whispering or speaking those words is not something that, I really expected to happen or that, has happened in, the previous 5-10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So there definitely is some push for that. The one other thing, I mean, before we get out of here that I did want to talk about as well with the national media, and for me, it's a weird phenomenon. The Hall of Fame. Whether you're a big Hall of Fame guy, a small Hall of Fame guy, and this I had written down, but I didn't know if I was going to talk about it until something came across my feed earlier today. The White Sox are going to put a statue for Mr. Mark Burley out in front of their stadium. My wife is going to be oh so happy. As the White Sox fan she is. But I don't really understand this whole Hall of Fame process. And someone needs to, at some point in time, sit down, and I could do probably an hour-long show on my feelings concerning the Hall of Fame. But just for you people out there who are thinking, Mark Burley, the man who I believe is sitting around like 10% of the vote for the Hall of Fame, when you look at the Hall of Fame, a lot of times people look towards war. Mark Burley has 59.1 B WAR for his career, a 381 ERA. Everybody knows he had a perfect game. Led the league in innings a few times, complete games. He was a guy that was going to go out in the time of baseball and get over 200 innings. I always look towards WHIP, a 1.281 WHIP for Mr. Burley. And you would think that, 4-time Gold Glover, led his team to the World Series, like pretty much put the team on his back to win that. 5-time All-Star, getting only 10%. The pitcher that got in there this year, and I do believe that he is a Hall of Famer, but 62.3 WAR, a 3.74 ERA, did have a Cy Young, also has, and I think it was a league championship MVP, does have a World Series in there and everything. Part of, some super teams, as some would say, because that was the Yankees. And you would think, you know what, Craig, did he pitch like the same amount of years, maybe less years than Mark Burley? No, Mark Burley pitched 16 years. CC Sabathia pitched 19 years. So if you're going on WAR per year, Mark Burley is up over top of there. And that's what I don't understand about this voting. I could go off about, well, this guy's building his case towards being a Hall of Famer. What the heck does that even mean? Building their case towards being a Hall of Famer. They're either a Hall of Famer or they're not a Hall of Famer. This whole thing where, like, Wagner gets in his 10th year and it becomes this, giant celebration. They were talking about him being a borderline guy. So for the previous 9 years, all the Hall of Fame voters, like, didn't do their job and didn't know his numbers well enough to know that he was a Hall of Famer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really get that piece of everything here where a guy is like, a slam dunk Hall of Famer and a guy has comparable numbers, he's only getting 10% of the vote. And don't even get me started on the whole Carlos Beltran thing where he almost got in. And we talk about they'll push that clause that they love to talk about so much. That clause where it's like you have to be a good guy on and off the field. And you're giving this guy 70% of the vote, and he is a guy who was the ringleader, the only player that was not granted immunity during one of the biggest cheating scandals in the history of Major League Baseball. So don't even come at me with that kind of stuff. That's if we're talking about a system being broken,
Mm-hmm.
the Hall of Fame voting system is broken.
Yeah.
I when they talk about taking away people's rights to vote of this, I don't even know why some of these writers get to vote because they will even admit that they do not watch teams other than the team they're covering, or they don't watch as much baseball, but then they are given the right to vote for that kind of stuff. And like I said, a little bit of a rant here. We haven't had a Craig Toth rant here in a little while, but for me, Mark Burley, Hall of Famer, if CC Sabathia is a Hall of Famer.
He'll be the next guy that's that, you know, building his case or the politicking to get a little bit more. Todd Helton got in, now Billy Wagner gets in. I want to know who didn't vote for Ichiro. If anybody deserves, we've talked in the past about Ken Griffey Jr. should have been unanimous. You know, there's people who voted against like Babe Ruth being in the Hall of Fame.
Jeter should have been unanimous. I hate Derek Jeter. He should have been unanimous.
Sure. I can go with you on that. I guess he's not my favorite, but I can respect that. The fact that it was a closer who finally got, that's a whole nother thing. But Ichiro Suzuki should have been unanimous. He is one of the most slam dunk Hall of Famers in my mind. First ballot. And CC Sabathia, I will never forget the year that he went to the Brewers towards the end of the season. And you talk about putting a team on your back and taking them into the playoffs. The way that he almost single-handedly got the Brewers into the playoffs that year was huge. Herculean, even. But just to go back to the salary cap thing, just real quick, I had a question. My buddy Jake asked me and said, hey, maybe I can bring this up. Would you sacrifice a season of Major League Baseball to get a salary cap system that would more evenly distribute the resources of Major League Baseball and create a more even playing field payroll-wise?
Prior to the pandemic season, I would have probably said no. And I know there was a lot of other stuff going on during that time and everything, but for me, not having baseball during that was extremely tough. But knowing that you could come out on the other side with something hopefully similar to what exists in, the other major sports,
Mm-hmm.
at this point in time, 1,000%, I would say yes. And for that, it's just basically, does Ben Cherington suck at his job? We can say he sucks at his job because, the Pirates haven't brought in a winner just yet. But do we really know that if he's not on a level playing field and is basically operating this with one hand tied behind his back? I mean, he basically said, that he had to make certain trades happen to be able to, even go out and do the trades that he did at this juncture. Would Jazz Chisholm, would Randy Arozarena have been an option if they were able to spend more? Because, I mean, yeah, the other team has to make that trade, and there may have been some stuff in there that would have held that up. But it doesn't even seem like those trades were an option because the money wasn't there to do it. So you can't really, in my mind, kind of judge, a GM on that. But yeah, my answer, Scott, is 1,000%. What do you say, man?
Yeah, I agree. I think about the NHL and the lockout that they had and how that potentially was the best thing that could have happened to that league. Certainly, as Pittsburgh fans, we definitely benefited from that. Who knows if the Penguins are still in Pittsburgh if they don't have that lockout? And I know that baseball's in a better position than the NHL was prior to the lockout. But if things go the way that they are, and that's what makes it difficult with baseball, is because there's not the same kind of I guess, free develop. Like the NFL has college; they don't have to pay for those programs. That's not within their umbrella of their organization, and so hockey has that. But the in baseball, you don't have your slam dunk. Like Paul Skeens was a no doubt 1-1, as close as you could probably have in Major League Baseball, and he fast tracked. But in a normal year, you don't have, and I think that that's where you see some of that parity. People talk about the parity in baseball, how every team has made the playoffs in the last 10 years. But as we bring up over and over again, you're going to have the top teams that are perennial contenders. The Dodgers, the Mets, the Braves, these teams, the Phillies, these teams that can spend money are going to be constantly in the playoffs. They're going to be winning their divisions. They're going to be threats. You're going to have other teams that cycle in and out every decade. And I think that there's going to get to a point where there's a lot of casual fans are going to get sick of that. You're going to have Royals fans, you're going to have Tigers fans, you're going to have Pirates fans that are going to have to go through rebuilds every little bit, and they're just going to get sick of it because we see it in Pittsburgh. And I don't live down there, so I don't hear it on the sports radio like maybe you do, but I'm sure that a ton of fans get really upset. Oh, here goes another rebuild. But we had a few years of winning. Now we're going to have to rebuild again. And they just turn off the team for 4 to 5 years at a time. And that's not healthy for a league. At least in the NFL, every team comes into the season with the opportunity. Who would have seen the Commanders coming this year to get all the way to the NFC Championship game? Nobody, I think, saw them coming to that level. But that's because, again, that's where baseball and football can be different. They have a splash draft pick. Now, the Pirates have that, something that most major league teams don't get a chance to, but they don't have the resources to fairly build around it in the same way that other teams do. And so they have to get more creative, to catch the lightning in the bottle, like we keep mentioning. So, yeah, I would sacrifice a season to have a more level playing field and provide that opportunity. Let's prove that Ben Cherington sucks at his job when it comes to the resources being spent evenly, and then it's just about competency. We know that the Browns are bad, not because they can't spend as much money as other teams. It's they can't competently coach, develop, acquire talent. And that's what it comes down to. We need a more level playing field. And I think that baseball could be healthier and more exciting if it had that.
Absolutely, man. And that's where it kind of comes down to is a level playing field and having the ability to prove that Ben Cherington does or doesn't suck.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing